Hello and welcome to today's video. So this time we're starting a brand new series where I look at 10 or so vintage TV tie-ins or TV adaptations that I really enjoy. So sit back, relax, and let's take a look. Okay, the first one we're looking at here is Survivors, which was a mid-1970s BBC series created by Terry Nation. And it was the series he created before he went on to do Blake 7. Now, there was two tie-in books for this one. This is the original one written by Terry Nation, which is basically the story of season 1 of the series, except at the very end, Abby Grant does actually meet up with her son, unlike in the series. And the twist of the story, I suppose, is he doesn't even recognise her because so much time has passed. So that's the first one. But although that's a great book, this one is actually better. It's written by John Ayers, and this is much more well into the sort of after the disaster, and it bases the story around London, which is something that the TV series naturally had to shy away from because creating like a rundown London was really, really difficult from a special effects point of view. But in the books, of course, you didn't have those restrictions. So it bases around a group of survivors who are living at the Oval cricket ground, and they've made the grounds of the Oval. They've turned it into farmland, and then there's lots of little groups dotted around London trying to take over their sort of their operation. It's really, really good, and I think it's actually better than the original Survivors book. So Genesis of Here, both of these are getting a little bit scarce these days, but it's the hardbacks, which I don't have, which are super expensive nowadays. Mine are actually signed by Caroline Seymour, who was Abby Grant in the TV series. I met her at a convention once, and thankfully I took my Survivors books along with me. So that's the first one, predominantly Survivors Genesis over here. Absolutely fantastic. Next we've got Man from U.N.C.L.E. So I pulled out an odd British one and an odd American one. So the British series there was 16 plus a one-off. In America, I think it was in maybe 28. It was a huge, huge run of these Man from U.N.C.L.E. paperbacks. Basically, they're not high literature by any means, but the few that I've read, and they are super quick reads, they're just like a bit like a Doctor Who Target book. They're about 120, 130 pages. You can get through these in a couple of sittings. It's basically the same sort of structure as an episode. It's almost like in 3 acts, and it uses quite a few cliches, and I wouldn't say there was any sort of scintillating stories here, anything that will really attract you. However, the actual look and feel of the books is fantastic. It's very much of the period, the 1960s, and was it 67, 68, I guess? Yeah, 67, this one. And they're not bad. I mean, they're really great fun to collect. And if you like The Man from U.N.C.L.E. and that sort of 60s spy vibe, then these will be right up your street. Once again, I've got a few signed by Robert Vaughan when he was at the NEC Memorabilia show, and I was lucky to get a huge wedge signed by him. Up next, I've got a couple of MASH books. Now, these are the British ones published by Spear, and MASH was definitely one of my favourite sitcoms. And the books, though, took an interesting turn, because I've always thought the most interesting episodes of MASH are when they're actually leaving the camp and they're going off somewhere, and the books basically pick up on that. So it's the regular MASH cast in different parts of the world. This one here's MASH goes to Moscow, MASH goes to Hollywood, and there was a whole range of them. I haven't really researched how many of these there actually are, but when I see them, I generally pick them up because they're quite good fun, and they were all written by Richard Hooker and William E. Butterworth, and I think they're fantastic. When I get the last few, I might do like a full series overview of these, because they're pretty good. I've got a couple of like making of MASH books as well, which are pretty cool if you are really into the series. Next, The Invaders, a Quinn Martin production. So once again, I've pulled an American one here. I think this is the very first one by Pyramid Books. Yeah, and a really, really great jacket on that one with Roy Thinnes on the front. When was this? Again, 1967 again. And over in the UK, they were published by Corgi. I believe there's like 4 or 5 of these. This is the Meteor Man. And if you've ever sat through The Invaders, I think, like most people I've spoken to about it, they loved the series, and just as he was starting to get some traction with like the government and getting some sort of government authorities on his side that believed his story, the blimmin' series was cancelled, like 2/3 of the way through series 2, and I was always absolutely gutted that it never really got resolved. It did get revived, I think, back in the was it the 1990s. He came back, and didn't Scott Bakula do a version of it as well? Once again, I've deliberately not watched those because I don't want to spoil my memory of the 60s series, but the books are very much like one of the episodes. Nothing actually ever gets resolved, and he's left as hopeless and lost without any support as he is in almost every episode of the series. But they are really good. There's not many to collect, and I think they're quite almost like iconic if you're a fan of the series. Next, the Avengers. Once again, another 60s series that I absolutely love. Now, I've pulled 2 books here. Now, they did a series of Avengers novels, and they did a couple which were sort of ghost written by Patrick Macnee. I think it was his story, and then they were written by someone else. There's a couple of these, and these did get reprinted. Then there's a series of, I think, 5 novels in the UK, and I think 9 in America got printed. So these ones by Patrick Macnee, as I said, there's a pair. I think they're absolutely fantastic. Emma Peel there on the back. Beautiful, beautiful designed Hodder ones, these, and I absolutely love them. Once again, it's that great period, 1965, this one. Mid-60s. You won't go far wrong with something like that. Obviously, these are quite collectible. The Avengers in general is a collectible subject. The British ones, £5 to £8, depending on condition. The 2 Patrick Macnee ones, 10 to 15. There's one by Console as well, with which is also quite a difficult one to get. That one's upwards of 25. The American one's much, much more common, although I haven't brought any down today. I have got some, but not all of them. And they're, about £5 a copy. Just harder to get in the UK. Now, I wanted to mention this one as well. So this is obviously not a book. This is part of a series that were published by Virgin with these familiar authors, Paul Cornell, for Doctor Who work, Martin Day and Keith Topping, and they did quite a few books on genre television, which were published by Virgin, and I think they're excellent. So I've always got these to hand if I'm ever watching like an episode of the Avengers. So almost all of them are on BritBox, for example. Now you could pull one at random, and I would always go and look up the episode before watching it, because they'd be full of trivia, things to look out for, guest stars you might not have recognised first time round, that sort of thing. And that, to me, is part of the attraction of watching the Avengers these days, is looking at the old guest stars. In fact, the very last one I watched had John Pertwee in, which was superb, absolutely superb to see Pertwee just before he took on the Doctor Who role. So anyway, the Avengers books, there's not that many to get, even if you include the American ones. It's probably 20 books in total. So I think it's a great fun series, good fun to watch today, particularly if you're a fan of Diana Rigg, because they're my favourite ones, the colour Diana Riggs, and good stuff. Next, a trio. So I'm really sort of pushing the boat out here with 3 books this time round, and it's 3 what I consider fantastic Star Trek books, absolutely amazing. So the first one is a photo novel, so it's not an adaptation, it's the episode in photo novel form. I'm sure you've seen these before. They were a phenomenon of the late 1970s, and there was movies done in this format. They did 12 Star Trek books, and this is the very first one. Absolutely amazing. It was one of the award-winning ones, as you can imagine, and it's the full classic story. There's Joan Collins, recently 90 this week she was, Joan Collins, and it's the full story. I said all the script is in there, and there's a little interview with Harlan Ellison, the author of that classic show. And they chose this one to launch the series, so it's numbered number 1, and they do the familiar cast list, which I absolutely love. And I think at the back they do they have the quiz in there? No, I haven't got it. Yeah, later on in this series they actually introduce a quiz about that particular episode, so I think it's superb. It's a great way to read these. Of course, this is before home video, so if you wanted to relive an episode, unless you got lucky and caught it on a repeat, this was how you sort of showed your appreciation for the series, was buying the TV tie-in, and that's what this is. And that's a particularly good one. That's probably my all-time favourite photo novel, and in my top 3 or 4 favourite ever Star Trek episodes. So really fantastic, that one. Now, this next one's another making of. It's not an adaptation at all. This is the story or the making of Star Trek. Stephen Whitfield and Gene Roddenberry. So Stephen Whitfield was actually invited by Roddenberry to come on to the series, I think during the final Series 3, whilst it was being made, and go behind the scenes. So he got access to all the cast and crew while they were making the series. And it's just a great, great book. And there was when I first read this, which was once again probably in the early 80s, I didn't really know how Star Trek came to be. And I picked up, because although this is the first printing from Ballantine, and the book remained in print for a long, long time. In fact, I think it even got reprinted in the 90s. It's so definitive, and I just loved it. It's stacked with pictures, design concepts. I mean, I just read it cover to cover at least 2 or 3 times. I really, really enjoyed it. I seem to remember there was a picture in here, which I'm certain they must have used as the basis for the Liberator spaceship in Blake 7. I'm sure this is where I first saw it. It was one of like the early concepts for the Enterprise. Doubt we'll be able to come across it now, but we'll keep flicking through. But as you can see, it's just a great book. And as a fan of the show, finding out how it came to be was just, really something. Here we are. Look. Does that not look like the Liberator in some form? It does to me. Yeah, there we are. Look. I mean, they were designing the Liberator. They had this book on their shelf. I'm certain of it. I mean, that's just too familiar. That is just too much of a coincidence, isn't it? Anyway, it's a great, great read, this one. It really is. So highly recommended. Then the last of the Trek books, and I'll probably come back to these again in a future video with perhaps my favourite Star Trek novels, because there's so many great ones. There's been a lot published, of course. But this is another behind-the-scenes one. These are all sort of similar on the shelf, so I grabbed this one as well. This is by David Gerrold. Now, David Gerrold almost sort of started his career with Star Trek, and he was the author of one of my other favourite episodes, The Trouble with Tribbles, and he did, of course, the follow-ups. And this is basically how he got the Tribbles to screen. And this is a particularly nice, so I'm going to be very careful with it, first edition of this one. And it is a great book, but once again, this is in print a long time, so it's not difficult to get your hands on. Absolutely fantastic book. It really is, what they went through to actually get an episode to screen. Yeah, quite scarce, this one. In first edition, there we are, May 1973, and that one's also been signed. But he does. He's written some science fiction as well. David Gerrold. He's a great writer. Everything I've read of his that he wrote, I've really, really enjoyed. So yeah, I think he's just a great all-round writer. So next we've got a pair of Doctor Who books. Now, I couldn't do one of these videos without including one of my all-time favourite series, and these were 2 of my all-time favourite novelisations. Now, they're both written by Terrance Dicks, who wrote an awful lot of the original novels. He was working on the series as well at the time. So we'll start off with Planet of the Spiders. Now, I don't think it was the first one I read in this series, but it was one that I remember I was given a copy in hardback when it was first published. So I remember having it in hardback, which I wish I still had that one now, because it was not ex-library. I had it brand new, and yeah, quite a rarity. But this is the original jacket to this one. And I just remember it was one of the earliest stories I remember actually watching. Season 11, I can remember The Time Warrior, and I can remember Planet of the Spiders. I think it was repeated as well. I probably remember the repeat leading into season 12 with Tom Baker's first year. But yeah, I've got lots of fond memories of this one, and also Genesis of the Dark. So this was from season 12, once again by Terrance Dicks. One of my favourite Chris Achilles covers there. Absolutely fantastic. I think no one did Daleks like Chris Achilles. I think we can all agree to that. Absolutely fantastic. Really, really love these. Now, this particular one, although on the whole these earlier Doctor Who books don't exactly expand much on the script, and in some cases, they are almost word for word. It's just the script put into a book form. They were so influential when Doctor Who didn't get a lot of repeats, although both of these were repeated sort of at the time. Genesis of the Daleks, it just had a huge impact on me, and I remember reading it in this. It was also reprinted in the big Dalek Omnibus, which was published by Marks and Spencer's, which is also fantastic. They reprinted, I think, Planet of the Daleks and Genesis of the Daleks, and I remember reading it in that. And it's just a great book. It simply is. It was such a good story. It just leads itself to being a fantastic book as well. So I could have easily pulled out 20 top Doctor Who novels, but I think those two mean quite a bit to me. And obviously there's loads of later series when it was sort of revived that I love as well. But for sheer nostalgia, holding these in my hands is it's something quite special. I just love them. I really do. They mean quite a bit to me. Next, something completely different. The Sweeney. So I absolutely love the Sweeney. I always have done, ever since I was old enough to watch it. Quite violent, even today, as the series is approaching, well, best part of 50 years ago since the pilot went out. We're almost at that time now, and it's like a little time capsule looking back on London at that time when you watch the episodes. There's only 4 seasons, there's a pilot, and there's 2 movies. It did spawn, there was a few books, there was 3 annuals, and there was, I think there's maybe a dozen books. I've got them all. I've pulled out a couple here today. So this is one, and I've read them all. Admittedly, not for quite a while, but I was so into the Sweeney. I remember even going on holiday and taking about 6 with me and just flying through them because they're just decent sort of crime thrillers more than anything, with the characters that you're familiar with, and I really love them. So that's like just an odd, almost like an episodic one. Quite difficult to find this one with the black cover, and that's a pretty nice copy of that one. As I said, they did a couple of movies which, if anything, are even more violent. They really are quite something, though. So if you ever get to see the Sweeney or the Sweeney 2, they are recommended. And once again, great movie tie-ins, and they come recommended. So the Sweeney, if you like a bit of 70s police drama, hard hitting at that, then that's the series to go for. Right, V, back to the science fiction. This was a phenomenon and a half, wasn't it, in the 1980s? And this original book here, A.C. Crispin's book, was an absolutely massive bestseller. So when V aired in the UK, I think it was on 1984, and it was on really late after the Los Angeles Olympics, as I recall. And I remember having to stay up, gone 11 before it even started. And then it was like, each episode was like 2 hours, wasn't it? The original miniseries. I absolutely loved it. I was a big fan of it. I don't think this is this a first? No, this is a 10th printing. Yeah, July 84. It's a 10th printing, but it's a lovely one. But it's black cover. But if you were around then, I believe this book was an absolute bestseller. It was everywhere, absolutely everywhere. And then the follow-up, that's a New English Library again. This was the second one, the East Coast Crisis. And this TV series spawned probably, I have covered them, I think maybe 14 books. The last 6 or so never got published in the UK. They're much harder to find. But these are the British editions. You've got the New English Library sort of TARDIS logo there in the corner, but that's actually New English Library. And these initial ones, I'd say the first 5 or 6 are actually really good sort of stories within the V universe. The later ones, which were only published in the States, much more formulaic and quite thin books, and really just for the diehards. Although a couple of them have got quite good concepts. But this is the original one, and as I said, I think it's in the world of TV tie-ins, it's an absolute classic. And if you're ever into the series, you've got to get the V books because they're just superb. Thankfully, because they were so popular, they're very easy to get these days. Then the last ones is Porridge. It's a comedy series, and Porridge is probably my all-time favourite sitcom. I absolutely love it. Certainly my favourite from the 1970s, and there was a few that I like, including Reggie Perrin and Rising Damp I love as well. But Porridge, I think, floats to the top. It's probably my favourite one. Now, all the Porridge scripts, in effect, were put into book form, and that's what these are. So it's not really anything more than what you're seeing on screen. In fact, it's like that's season 1. Prisoner and Escort was the pilot for Porridge, and Ronnie Barker himself did 7 different like pilots, and that was one of them. And Prisoner and Escort, he did it with Mr. Barraclough, the character Mr. Barraclough, led on to the series. So that's the pilot and then the first season. And it's just basically putting each episode into almost like an extended essay. The Red Dwarf books are very similar to this as well. But as tie-ins go, they did all the series, and they also did one for the Porridge movie, which is really good fun as well if you've not seen that. And then when Fletcher eventually does get out of prison, he goes on to Going Straight, the same team, of course, and they did the same for that, but that only ran for the one series. But they are basically sort of slightly glorified adaptations of the episodes. It's as simple as that. But I really, really like them. And there's one other one, which is Fletcher's Book of Rhyming Slang, which is also like a vague TV time, but not many on Porridge, but it's a great, great little sitcom, which I love. So there you go. Hope you liked those first 10 vintage TV tie-ins and books about TV shows that I absolutely love. And I can easily do another 10 of these because I'm such a fan of TV tie-ins, and I've got them dotted all over my various collections. So if you like this one, do please give the video a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed for regular TV tie-in and vintage paperback content, and I'll look forward to seeing you again with another one of these very soon. Bye.